everybody. What do you call a blue that is not heavy? Light blue. Right, that's a bad joke. But good day, everybody, and I hope the ABRSM Grade 6 to 8 takers are really preparing for the exams in the right way, and I hope there's a good preparation. But anyways, good day, ABRSM Grade 6 to 8 theory test takers. In today's lesson, it's going to be a continuation of July's lesson from a few months ago, where I talked about musical terms, and today we're going to be talking about intervals. Now, just a few things before I talk about the lesson content today. We are still going to be on the question 4 and question 5 types of questions. So we're not going to move on to ABRSM grade 6 question 1, 2, and 3. Once I complete the ABRSM's grade 4 question 4 to question 5. Okay. Now you might be wondering why am I doing this video at September even though my last video was from July, because I was traveling to Europe and all other sorts of countries, so I wasn't being able to create videos during that journey because the Wi-Fi seems to be dead. So yeah, I hope you can understand that reason as we move on. So yeah, let's talk about intervals here. So the average grade 6 to 8 taker might be asking, I know how to calculate the interval already. I mean, it's been like a few years since I know how to calculate an interval, and I'm really pro at it. But the ABRSM grade 6 to 8 adds an extra difficulty to this. Okay, you may see in this example that this is actually going to be one of those example problems of the interval was that the ABRSM grade 6 to 8 theory examiners will definitely put. They'll put transposing instruments to different clefs, or they might put two transposing instruments, or they might ask you to find an interval from high note to piano or low note to piano, which is really difficult to do if you are taking practice exams right now. But don't worry, in this video, we're going to be going over what to do when we see these types of questions. So let's get started. So I've created this mind map so that you know what questions to be asking yourself when answering these questions. Okay, so the first question you must ask whenever you're having a question with these types of lyrical intervals is to ask, is the interval more than an octave? Okay, and I hope you know what an octave is. It's basically from one note to another note, but on a different pitch. So I hope you know what an octave is. If you don't know what an octave is, good luck. You're basically cool. Now, the reason why you should ask this question first is because there are going to be a lot of intervals that are more than an octave. So for these types, we define them as the compound. And then for these types that are not more than an octave, we call these normal intervals. Okay? Now, what should we do if we have a compound interval? Let's say if you answered yes to this question, what should we do if we have a compound interval? Well, basically use the normal way to find an interval, but add the word compound at the beginning of the answer. So let's say compound minor 5th, compound diminished 6th, compound augmented 7th, something like that, right? Now, yes, you could use another notation where you say major 9, major 10, minor 11th, but that will take a lot longer to do on the actual exam, and just placing compound at the beginning of the interval will actually save you a lot of time during the exam. Okay, I'm just telling you from a personal view, adding compound is more better than just memorizing major 9, major 10, major 11, major 12. So yeah. Now, let's say if you answer no to the question and you have a normal interval, the next question you must ask yourself is whether if the interval is a 4th, 5th, or an 8th. Okay? If you answer yes to this question, the interval is a perfect interval. Now, what is a perfect interval? Perfect intervals are intervals that have a 4th, 5th, or 8th within the notes. Okay. Now, why do we not call them major 4th, or minor 4th, or etc.? Because a major 4th and a minor 4th kind of sound the same. A major 5th and a minor 5th kind of sound the same. So we basically use the word perfect. Okay. Now let's see if you got a perfect interval, but you don't think it's a perfect interval. You need to be asking this question next. Okay. Does the interval sound perfect? So let me show you an example. Okay? By the way, if you're dealing with these questions and you don't know what in the world the interval is, you can just draw a keyboard in the exam and you get the message. So let's say we have a perfect interval. an example, I need to do C to G, right? It kind of sounds perfect, right? So if it sounds perfect, then it's gonna be you're gonna add the word perfect with the distance between the two notes. So for example, C to G is a perfect because its distance is a fifth. Now, if it doesn't kind of sound perfect, let's say I do F C to G flat, right? You kind of know that it doesn't sound perfect. Then you have to ask this following question: does the interval sound small or wider than the typical perfect interval? Okay, so if it sounds small, you're gonna be writing the word diminish. I will take it for short, but you're gonna be writing the full name diminish with the distance. And then if it's wider, you're gonna be writing an augmented, and then you just write the distance. So for example here, C to G flat, it kind of sounds like a diminished interval because you have CG and you kind of move from C to G flat, it kind of sounds smaller. So therefore we use diminish. Okay? So augment is going to be C to G sharp because it kind of sounds wider than expected. Okay? Now let's say you don't have the perfect example and you answer no to this question, you're going to be moving to the normal example. Basically, normal intervals are basically intervals of unison, 1, 2nd, 3rd, 6th, 7th. Okay, those are the type of unison. And for these type of intervals, you have to consider these four: major, minor, diminished, and augmented. Okay. Now, since there are more options, there are more questions to answer when dealing with these types of intervals. First of all, does the interval feel sad or less space from the major interval? So let's say, for example, we do a major third from C, right? It will be C to E, right? But let's say we do C to E flat. It kind of feels a bit sadder than the major interval, right? And it kind of feels a bit smaller than the major interval. So you answer yes. So if you answer yes, you most likely have an interval that is a diminished or minor. Okay? Now, if you want to determine if it's diminished or minor, you have to answer this question at the end. It's kind of the same thing as the first question we asked. Does the interval feel more or less space than minor? Okay, so basically, let's say you have CE. Let's say we do C to E double flat, right? It kind of feels a bit smaller than the minor interval. So in this case, you'll be adding similarly the word diminish plus the distance of the interval. Okay, it's a diminished third, for example. But if it doesn't, or if it's not, then you're going to be adding minor, the distance of the interval. Okay. Now let's say you answer no to this question, then it will be either augmented or major. Now, the question you may be asking is kind of similar to this question as well. Does the interval feel more farther than the major interval? Let's say we have something like C to E sharp or whatever, C to E sharp, right? It's the same thing as an F. It kind of feels more farther than the major interval, right? So if you answer yes to this question, you'll be writing the word augmented plus the distance, so augmented third. But then if you answer no to this question, you're going to be writing major plus the distance. Okay. So this is basically a comprehensive mind map on how to actually answer the question. So you ask, is it a compound or a normal interval? If it's compound, you're basically doing number 3 again. And then if it's normal, you must ask if it's perfect. If it's perfect, then you'll be doing this. If it's normal, you'll be doing all these steps. Okay. Now, just to add on to the compound interval, again, if you see the word compound and if it is a perfect interval within that 2 notes, then you'll be doing this. If it's not compound, you'll be doing this. Okay. So yeah. And just one more thing I would like to say, I would like to reiterate so many times. Make sure to transpose and look at the clef. Okay, make sure you transpose the instrument to the right note and please look at the clef. Sometimes during the exam, let's say they give you like a cello and a bassoon or something, right? Sometimes they'll possibly give you a treble clef for the cello, even though the most common clef for the cello is a bass clef. But they'll probably add a treble clef in one of the bars and then the bassoon remains a bass clef. So please make sure you try to look at the clef properly, okay? Or else you basically lose, I think, 5 marks or 1 mark, whatever it is. Okay, so now since we know how to find a difficult interval in the exam, I want you to try this problem, okay? You can pause this video if you want, but I'll reveal the answers later on. So please pause the video and answer the problem. Okay, you're done. So the first thing I'll do in this problem is I'll basically just find the notes. Okay, so here in this case it says horn and F. I know that since it's a horn and F, I'll be moving a perfect drift downwards. So the actual notation E. Alright? Now yes, if you don't know how to transpose yet, and I haven't done a video on that, I'll try to make a video on how to transpose these instruments. Okay? And the viola in this case is a alto clef, and if you know your ABRSM grade grade 3, you know that this is going to be it. So E, so it's okay. This G right here is going to be somewhere right here, alright, for the second one. Okay. Now we need to calculate the interval from G to E. Alright, so in this case we'll just go, it's my map, right? Is the interval more than the octave? No, so it's going to be a normal. Now it's the interval of 4, 5, 8? No, so it's not going to be perfect at all. Now let's move on to the major, minor, or the major augmented side. So does the interval kind of sound sad or less good for major interval? Well, in this case, G to E kind of sounds happy. So it kind of sounds like a major and augmented interval. So we'll be disregarding this. So it's either augmented or major. Now does the interval kind of feel more farther? Well, I don't see any type of farthness in this interval. So in this case, it doesn't seem a bit farther. So I answer no here. And the answer is going to be a major, since G to E is 6 apart, a major 6. Okay? So yeah, again, these types of questions will definitely come out on your question 5 paper. So please make sure to really memorize and know conceptually this mind map and practice with a few problems. Then you'll be alright. Okay? In fact, I'm going to give you a few problems that is in the end of this video to try. So yeah, let's move on to the practice problems. Okay, so here are the practice problems you can try. You can pause the video if you want, and I'll review the answers later. Okay, got the answers? Let's go through each of them. And by the way, I'm sorry for the poor markers. If you can't see them, I'll still straight away, and we can do it. But now, so let's look at question 1. Right, we have a clarinet A at the note D in the high. So in this case, we transpose it a minor third down, right? So that's going to be G sharp, right? That's for the clarinet A. Then we also have a double bass, which we often transpose octave down. So we'll be actually this low. So this low A to a G is definitely higher than an octave, right? So we probably have to put compound somewhere in the answer, right? So we compound something. Now, if we take A to G sharp, right, it's basically not a perfect interval, right? It kind of sounds like a major 7, right? Because it kind of sounds happy. A to G sharp kind of sounds happy. So the answer for this is going to be a compound major 7. Alright, so yeah, if you got this question correct, good job. Let's move on to the next few questions. Okay, so here we have the viola in the alto clef, and the note here is going to be a C, right? A high C. Okay. Yeah, it kind of looks like a high C. But now we have a trumpet in D, so in order to transpose that, we have to transpose it one semitone downward because the nearest D is basically one semitone downward. So, in other words, it will sound like D, this C. Okay. So now we have this high C, which is this one in the treble clef. So we know that C to D, it doesn't sound compound, right? And it doesn't sound like a perfect interval, and it kind of sounds like a major second. Right, C to D kind of sounds happy, so it's going to be a major second. Alright, now this one is the piano example. We have a really low C and a really high E, so we know that's definitely going to be compound, right? And it's not going to be perfect because we don't have a 4th, 5th, or 8th. And we know C to E, normal C to E kind of sounds major. So the answer here is going to be a compound major third. Okay. For the fourth question, we have a piccolo, which is a transposing instrument. So it's one octave higher. So it's basically this E. And now we also have an horn in E. And we know that's going to be a 6 downwards. So a minor 6 downwards is going to be a C. So coincidentally, this is actually another compound interval. And from C to E is going to be a major third. So this is actually the same as E3. Okay, I hope you're doing well on these. Again, if you tend to struggle in these, don't worry, they're actual practice papers given from the ABRSM. So you can practice these questions on there as well. Okay, this one is question 5. Here we have an F sharp and an A. Okay, a higher A. So in this case, we know that definitely going to be compound, and it's not going to be a perfect interval. So in this case, F to A kind of seems happy, but F sharp to A kind of seems a bit smaller, and it kind of sounds minor. So it's going to be a compound minor third. Alright. After that. Now question 6, I'm attempting on the figure guys by making this a soprano clef, which is a thing you should learn with ABRSM Grade 5. Okay, so in this case, this is just a normal D sharp and treble clef, but for a cello, since this is a soprano clef, it's actually gonna be an F, middle C F, right? The C is right here. So in other words, it's gonna be an F. It's gonna be somewhere right here. Okay. Now in this case, this is definitely gonna be a compound interval. It's not gonna be a perfect interval because there's no 4th, 5th, or 8th. And in this case, it's from F to G sharp. Now that kind of seems a bit weird. So it's actually going to be, because it's pretty much farther than a major second, right? So it's actually going to be a compound, augmented second. Alright? Okay, last 2 questions, I decided to make them really hard by adding double flats and double sharps. So please make sure you remember them, okay? So here we have clarinet and B flat, we have a C double sharp. So we know that's going to be a semitone downward. So we know C double sharp is basically a D, so it should kind of sound like a C, right? Okay, just to make your life easier, this double, you don't have to write double sharp, okay? It kind of sounds like a C, because, yeah, it kind of sounds like a C, okay? Actually, no, it's not C. It's actually going to be C sharp, because you have B, C, C sharp, right? Double sharp, okay? So it's actually going to be a C sharp. Then we have this contrabassoon, which is basically an octave 9th downward, or we could say it's a major mid second downward with an octave. So we know it's going to be a G double flat, and that's going to be an F, and we know that's going to be a really low F right here. Okay? So in this case, this F to C sharp is definitely going to be a compound interval and a perfect interval because F to C is a fifth, so it's a perfect interval. And we know that kind of sounds like a augmented fifth because F to C kind of sounds perfect, and we add a C sharp, it's basically more harder. So it's going to be a compound perfect fifth. Alright. Last but not least, we have question 8, and I add a double sharp and double flat. In this case, this double sharp, C double sharp, is actually the same thing as a D double sharp, which is going to be an E. Right? And then this D double flat is actually going to be the same thing as a C double flat, which is going to be B flat, this low B flat. Okay? So in this case, again, this is a compound interval because it's more than an 8, and it could represent a perfect interval because B to E is a fourth. But in this case, since you have B to E, we're moving it from B flat, so it kind of seems a bit farther, so it's actually going to be a compound augmented fifth. Oh yeah, sorry, so yeah, all these answers are gonna be augmented and augmented. So again, if you struggled in most of these questions, I suggest probably reviewing an ABRSM grade 1 to grade 5 stuff on intervals, and probably doing some practice questions on the official ABRSM practice papers from grade 6 to 8. Or you could just search, or I could just suggest you some useful interval finder exercises that you could do online. Okay. So anyways, that's the end of the video. I hope this will help you in your exam preparation, and I hope you guys get distinctions on the exam. Thank you so much. See you in the next video.